I was gripping my knife, chopping onions, when a plate smashed against the wall an inch from my head. Suzanne, the sous chef, sneered, "You don't belong here, Jaden, and you never will." That wasn't just anger, it was a challenge, and I knew I had to fight for my place. I grew up in a small apartment in Cleveland where my mom cooked soul food that could make you cry. It was so good. I'd watch her, barely tall enough to reach the counter, stirring collard greens or frying chicken, dreaming I'd run a kitchen someday. At 18, I got into a culinary school in Chicago, scraping by with scholarships and late-night diner shifts. 2 years later, I had a diploma, a knife set, and a fire in my gut to be a chef. But at La Belle Epoque, this upscale restaurant where linen napkins cost more than my rent, I was nobody. Just Jaden, the guy stuck washing dishes and chopping carrots, my diploma gathering dust in a drawer. I thought my skills would speak for themselves. They didn't. From day one I felt it. The way the other cooks, mostly white, gave me side-eye when I walked in. Suzanne, the sous chef, was the worst. She'd smirk and say stuff like, "Don't mess this up, Jaden, it's not your mom's kitchen." It wasn't just her words. It was how she'd hand me the grunt work, cleaning grease traps, scrubbing pots, while others got to plate entrees. I'd catch her whispering to the head chef, their eyes flicking to me like I was some charity case who didn't belong. The kitchen was a pressure cooker. Shouts, sizzling pans, and the constant tick of the order clock kept everyone on edge. There was a clear pecking order. The real chefs, mostly white guys with fancy culinary school pedigrees, and then us, the dishwashers, prep cooks, the outsiders. Me, Carlos the dishwasher, a quiet Mexican guy, and a couple others were the invisible ones, stuck with the dirty jobs. I told myself I'd prove them wrong, show them my knife skills, my sauces, my ideas. But every time I tried, Suzanne shut me down like my dreams were a joke. Inside I was burning with pride, knowing I could cook circles around half the crew. Outside, I was just the kid they didn't see. It was a packed Friday night at La Belle Epoque, the kind of shift where the kitchen felt like a furnace and every second was a sprint. I was on sauce duty, stirring a pot of beurre blanc for the halibut special, the air thick with butter and lemon. I'd been extra careful, measuring every ingredient twice, because I knew Suzanne was watching like a hawk, but somehow I screwed up. The sauce was too salty, way too salty. I caught it when I tasted it, my stomach dropping as the sharp tang hit my tongue. Before I could fix it, Suzanne was there, snatching the spoon from my hand. "What the hell is this, Jaden?" She barked, loud enough for the whole kitchen to hear. She didn't stop there. She held up the pot, waving it like evidence in a courtroom, her voice dripping with venom. "This is why you stick to peeling potatoes. You think you can handle this? You're not cut out for it, kid." The word kid wasn't just an insult, it was the way she said it, like I was some outsider who didn't belong in her world. I saw Carlos glance up from the dish sink, his eyes meeting mine for a split second before he looked away. Anna, the waitress, froze mid-step, tray in hand. The other cooks kept their heads down, chopping or stirring, pretending they didn't hear. But I knew they did. My face burned, not from the stove's heat, but from the shame of being called out in front of everyone. Inside, I was screaming. I'd spent years learning this craft, nights studying recipes, perfecting my knife cuts, dreaming of running a kitchen. I wasn't some slacker who didn't care. I wanted to yell back, tell her I knew the sauce was off and I could fix it. But my throat tightened, and all I could do was stand there gripping the counter. I wasn't going to let her see me crack. Not yet. I forced myself to breathe, slow and steady, and grabbed another pan. While Suzanne stormed off, I started a new batch of sauce, my hands moving on autopilot. I nailed it. Smooth, balanced, perfect. Nobody noticed, but I did. That sauce was proof I wasn't what she said I was. Still, her words stuck like grease I couldn't scrub off. Every time I closed my eyes that night, I heard her voice, saw her sneer. I kept telling myself I'd worked too hard to quit, that I'd earned my place. But the anger was building up, like a pot left on high heat, ready to boil over. I didn't know how much more I could take before something had to give. The weeks after the sauce incident felt like walking through a minefield. The kitchen at La Belle Epoque never slowed down. Orders flying, knives flashing, the air thick with steam and the smell of seared meat. But for me, it was Suzanne's voice that cut through the chaos. "Jaden, you're too slow with those onions," she'd snap, even when I was keeping pace with everyone else. "This isn't street food." "You don't get high cuisine." Her words always had that edge, like she was reminding me I didn't belong, not because of my skills, but because of who I was. I'd catch her watching me, her arms crossed, waiting for me to slip up. It got worse. One night, I prepped a batch of risotto for the dinner rush, measuring the stock and rice down to the gram. I turned away for maybe 2 minutes to grab parsley, and when I came back, the pot was a mess. Someone had dumped in way too much salt. I knew it was her. Suzanne stood nearby, smirking as the head chef tasted it and threw the whole thing out. "Nice work, Jaden," she said, loud enough for the line cooks to hear. My chest tightened, but I didn't say a word. I just started over, my hands shaking as I stirred a new batch. Another time, I plated a perfect salmon dish, the sauce glossy and balanced. Before it went out, Suzanne accidentally knocked it onto the floor, blaming me for being clumsy. The waitstaff snickered and I felt my face burn. Nobody stepped in. Carlos kept his head down, scrubbing pots like his life depended on it. Anna, the waitress, would give me a quick glance, like she felt bad, but she never said anything. The other cooks acted like I was invisible unless Suzanne was tearing into me. Then they'd shoot me pitying looks or laugh under their breath. It was like I was on an island surrounded by people who wouldn't throw me a rope. Every shift, I felt smaller, like I was shrinking under their stares. I'd go home, lie in bed, and replay every insult, every smirk. The shame was heavy, like grease soaking into my skin. I'd think about my mom, how proud she was when I got my diploma, and I'd feel sick knowing I was letting her down. The anger was there too, simmering, making my hands clench. I wanted to scream, to tell Suzanne she was wrong, but what good would that do? I just looked like the angry black guy they already thought I was. The despair was the worst. Some nights, I'd sit in my car outside the restaurant wondering if I should just quit. But then I'd remember the years I spent learning, the nights I stayed up perfecting recipes. I wasn't going to let her win. One evening, after she chewed me out for a dirty station that I'd cleaned twice, I started writing it all down. Every comment, every ruined dish, every time she made me feel like nothing. I kept a small notebook in my locker, scribbling details after every shift. It wasn't much, but it felt like fighting back, like I was building a case, even if I didn't know what for yet. I wasn't sure if it would change anything, but it kept me going. It was proof I wasn't imagining it, proof I wasn't what she said I was. The night it all broke open, the kitchen at La Belle Epoque was a pressure cooker ready to explode. It was a Saturday, the dining room packed with wealthy folks expecting perfection. I was at my station, plating a rack of lamb, my hands steady despite the chaos. Clanging pots, shouted orders, the hiss of sizzling meat. I'd spent the last hour perfecting the demi-glace, tasting it over and over to get the balance just right. For once, I thought I'd nailed it. Thought maybe Suzanne would leave me alone. I was wrong. She stormed over, her face red, eyes narrow. "Jaden, this is garbage," she said, loud enough for the whole line to hear. Before I could respond, she grabbed the plate, held it up like a trophy and hurled it at me. It smashed against the wall behind my head, sauce splattering across my apron, shards hitting the floor. "You don't belong in a kitchen like this," she screamed, her voice raw with something uglier than anger. "Go back to where you came from." The kitchen went dead silent. The air felt thick, like time itself stopped. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it over the hum of the exhaust fan. Every pair of eyes, cooks, dishwashers, even the busboy, was on me. I stood there, sauce dripping down my sleeve, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Her words weren't just about the plate or the food. They were about me, my skin, my place, everything I'd fought to become. Shame burned in my chest, hot and heavy, but under it was something else. rage. I'd taken her crap for months, her jabs, her sabotage, her smirks, but this was the line. I wasn't going to let her strip me down to nothing. I didn't yell back. I couldn't. My throat was too tight, my hands shaking as I clenched them into fists. But inside I was done swallowing it, done pretending I could just work harder and make it go away. I saw Anna, the waitress, standing frozen near the pass, her tray wobbling slightly. She'd heard it all. I caught her eye, and for a second I thought she might say something. Instead, she looked away, her lips pressed tight. I didn't blame her. She needed this job as much as I did, but it stung, like another door slamming shut. Then, out of nowhere, Carlos spoke up. He was at the dish sink, his hands still in soapy water, his voice low but steady. "That wasn't right, Suzanne," he said. "You know it." The whole kitchen turned to him, shocked. Carlos never spoke up, not in the months I'd known him. He'd taken his own share of crap, being called to help, getting stuck with the worst shifts, but he always stayed quiet. Not this time. His words were like a spark, small, but enough to make me feel less alone. After the shift, I pulled Anna aside in the alley behind the restaurant. The air was cool, smelling of garbage and cigarette smoke. "You saw what happened," I said, my voice low but firm. "You going to pretend it didn't?" She shifted, tugging at her apron, her eyes on the ground. "I don't know, Jaden," she said. "If I say something, I could lose my job." But it was wrong. I know it wasn't a promise, but it was something, a crack in the wall. That night, I went home and pulled out my notebook. I wrote down everything. Suzanne's words, the plate, the way the kitchen went silent. I added dates, times, even sketched out where everyone was standing. It felt like grabbing a lifeline. I didn't know if Anna would back me up or if Carlos would keep talking. But I wasn't going to let this slide. I'd spent years proving I could cook, proving I deserved to be here. Now I had to prove I deserved respect, and I was just getting started. After the plate incident, the kitchen at La Belle Epoque felt different, like the air was heavier, charged with something unspoken. I kept my head down, chopping vegetables and scrubbing pans, but my notebook was filling up. Every snide comment from Suzanne, every time she forgot to pass me an order, every glare that said I was less than. I thought I was the only one catching hell, but I was wrong. The truth about this place started slipping out in quiet moments, when the rush died down and the kitchen's noise faded to a low hum of clinking dishes and running water. One night I was mopping the floor after closing, the smell of bleach stinging my nose. Carlos was still at the dish sink, his sleeves rolled up, his hands moving like they had a mind of their own. He'd been different since he spoke up, less guarded, like he'd let a wall down. I took a chance. "You ever get tired of this?" I asked, leaning on my mop. "The way they treat us?" He didn't look up, just kept scrubbing, but after a long pause he said, "Every day, man. They don't see me, just the guy who cleans their mess." His voice was low, but there was a bite to it. He told me how he'd applied to be a line cook, even had experience from a taco joint back in Texas, but Suzanne laughed him off, said he was better suited for dishes. I felt a knot in my stomach. It wasn't just me. Carlos was stuck in the same trap, his skills buried because of who he was. Later that week, I overheard two prep cooks, both immigrants, one from Haiti, one from Vietnam, talking in the break room. The door was cracked, and I caught fragments over the hum of the vending machine. "You can be the best," the Haitian guy, Marcel, said, "but if you don't look like them, you're staying at the bottom." The other guy nodded, muttering about how Suzanne always gave the good shifts to her favorites, the white guys with less experience. I stood frozen, my heart racing. It was like they were reading my life out loud. This wasn't just Suzanne being a jerk. It was a system, a way of keeping people like us, black, brown, anyone who didn't fit their mold, pushed down. Then I started noticing things. Suzanne and Richard, the owner, would have these closed-door meetings in his office, their voices muffled but her laugh sharp through the walls. Once, I saw her hand him a stack of papers, probably schedules or inventory, and he clapped her on the shoulder like they were old buddies. It clicked. She wasn't just mean, she was protected. If she messed up like burning a sauce or miscounting orders, she'd pin it on someone else, usually me or Carlos. I remembered the night when a whole tray of desserts went missing, and she blamed me, saying I'd lost track. I hadn't touched them, but Richard didn't even ask my side. He just nodded at her, like her word was gold. That realization hit hard. I was in my car after a shift, the street lights casting shadows across my dashboard, my notebook open on the passenger seat. I'd written down everything, dates, times, what she said, what she did. But what was I supposed to do with it? Go to Richard? The guy who barely looked at me unless I was screwing up? I could lose my job, my chance to ever be a chef. My hands gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles tight. I thought about my mom, how she'd worked double shifts as a nurse to pay for my school, how she'd believed in me. Quitting wasn't an option, neither was staying silent. So I kept digging. I started asking questions, quiet ones, to people I thought might listen. I talked to Anna again, catching her by the lockers before she left one night. You know it's not just me, right? I said, keeping my voice steady. It's Carlos, Marcel, others. She's keeping us all down. Anna bit her lip, her eyes flicking to the door like she was scared someone would hear. I've seen it, she admitted, but Richard, he trusts her. I don't know if he'd believe us. She didn't promise to help, but she didn't shut me down either. It was enough to keep going. I started being more careful, watching Suzanne's every move. I noted when she gave easy tasks to her favorites, when she forgot to tell me about a new special so I'd look unprepared. I wrote it all down, my pen digging into the paper. I didn't have a plan yet, but I knew I couldn't let this stay buried. Carlos was with me now, quietly feeding me details about his own run-ins with her. Marcel started nodding at me in the kitchen, like he knew we were in the same fight. The fear was still there every time I walked into that restaurant. I felt it, like a weight on my chest. But the more I saw, the more I understood. This wasn't just about me. It was about all of us who were made to feel like we didn't belong, and I was done letting them win. The kitchen at La Belle Epoque had been a pressure cooker for weeks, but that Tuesday night, it felt like the lid was about to blow. I'd been carrying my notebook like a secret weapon, pages filled with every insult, every sabotaged dish, every time Suzanne made me feel like I was nothing. I decided it was time to talk to Richard, the owner. I couldn't keep dodging flying plates or swallowing her venom. My hands were sweaty as I stood outside his office door, the faint smell of cigar smoke leaking through the crack. I knocked, my heart hammering like it was trying to break out of my chest. Richard looked up from his desk, papers scattered, his glasses perched on his nose. "Jaden, what's this about?" he asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. I took a deep breath, the air tasting stale, and laid it all out. "It's Suzanne," I said. "She's been targeting me, sabotaging my work, throwing plates, saying I don't belong because of who I am." I pulled my culinary school diploma from my bag, the paper creased but proud, and slid it across his desk. "I'm good at this, Richard. I've got the skills, but she won't let me show it." His eyebrows went up, but he didn't say anything, just leaned back in his chair, waiting. I told him about the risotto she'd salted, the salmon she'd accidentally dropped, the way she'd screamed I should go back to where I came from. My voice shook, but I kept going, flipping open my notebook to read exact dates and times. "This isn't just me guessing," I said. "I've been keeping track." Richard's face stayed blank, but I saw his fingers tap the desk, a sign he was listening. Then the door creaked open, and Suzanne walked in, her apron still tied, her face tight like she'd heard everything. "What's this, a complaint session?" she snapped, crossing her arms. "Jaden's just mad he can't keep up." Before I could fire back, Carlos stepped in behind her. I hadn't even seen him coming. His hands were still damp from the dish sink, his eyes steady but nervous. "It's not just him," Carlos said, his voice low but clear. "She's done it to me, too." Told me I'm only good for dishes even when I applied for prep. Said I'd never fit in. The room felt smaller, the air thick with tension. Anna slipped in next, her tray tucked under her arm, her face pale. I saw the plate thing, she said, barely above a whisper. What she said? It was wrong, Richard. I should have spoken up sooner. I could see her hands trembling, but she stood her ground. Suzanne's face went red, her eyes darting between us like a cornered animal. This is ridiculous, she spat. They're ganging up on me because they can't handle the pressure. You know how it is, Richard. Kitchen's tough. They're just looking for excuses. She pointed at me. He's been sloppy since day one. You've seen the complaints about his work. That was a lie, and it stung like a slap. I wanted to lunge him across the room, but I held back, my jaw tight. Instead, I turned to Richard. Let me prove it, I said. Give me a chance to cook something right now. No interference. You'll see what I can do. Richard rubbed his chin, his eyes flicking from my diploma to Suzanne's scowl. All right, he said finally. Show me. Kitchen still open. We moved to the line, the other cooks watching, their knives paused mid-chop. I grabbed ingredients, fresh scallops, butter, herbs, and worked fast, my hands moving like they'd been waiting for this. I seared the scallops, golden and crisp, and made a quick lemon beurre blanc, smooth as silk. The kitchen smelled like heaven, and for once, nobody said a word. I plated it clean, precise, the way I'd practiced 1,000 times in school. Richard took a bite, chewed slowly, then nodded. This is good, he said. Damn good. Suzanne tried to jump in. One dish doesn't mean anything, she said, her voice sharp. He's still a liability. You've seen how he fumbles under pressure. But Richard held up a hand, cutting her off. Enough, he said. I've heard enough. He looked at me, then at Carlos and Anna, his face hard to read. You're saying this has been going on for months. Why am I just hearing about it now? Anna shifted, her voice small. We were scared, Richard. She runs things. Carlos nodded, his eyes on the floor. I could feel the weight of their words, the way they were risking their jobs just to back me up. Richard turned to Suzanne, his voice low. You've been my right hand for years, but this doesn't sit right. She started to argue, but he shook his head. We'll talk later. It wasn't a win. Not yet, but I felt the ground shift. The kitchen's system, the one that kept people like me and Carlos down, was starting to crack. Not because Richard was some hero, but because we'd finally spoken up. I stood there, my apron still stained from the sauce she'd thrown, my heart pounding but lighter. For the first time I felt seen, not as the kid who didn't belong, but as someone who could fight for his place. The days after my showdown with Richard were tense, like the kitchen at La Belle Epoque was holding its breath. The air still smelled of garlic and seared meat, but something had shifted. Richard called a staff meeting the next morning, his face grim as he stood by the prep counter. Suzanne's taking a leave, he said, his voice flat. We're looking into what happened. No apology, no details, just that. I caught Anna's eye across the room. She gave a small nod, like she was relieved but scared. Suzanne wasn't fired, just sidelined, and that stung. I'd wanted more, a clean win, but this was something. Richard pulled me aside after. You're on the line tonight, he said, handing me an apron. Don't screw it up. It wasn't a promotion, but it was a shot, my first real chance to cook, not just clean. That night I worked the grill, flipping steaks, my hands steady despite the knot in my gut. The other cooks watched, some with raised eyebrows, others with quick nods when my plates went out clean. Marcel, the Haitian prep cook, clapped me on the shoulder after service. Nice work, man, he said. It was small, but it felt like a crack in the wall that had kept me out. Still, the kitchen wasn't fixed. The same old hierarchy lingered. Guys like Carlos were still stuck on dishes, and I heard whispers about Suzanne coming back. I catch cooks glancing at me, some with respect, others like they were waiting for me to fail. I went home that night, my apron still heavy with grease, my notebook tucked in my bag. I'd won a battle, but the war wasn't over. The system that let Suzanne do what she did was still there, creaking, but standing. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, knowing I'd have to keep fighting, keep proving I belonged. Weeks after Suzanne's suspension, I stood at my station in La Belle Epoque's kitchen, the familiar clatter of pots and sharp scent of onions filling the air. I was on the line now, grilling steaks, my hands moving with the confidence I'd fought hard for. But every shift I felt the weight of the place, the same old hierarchy, the whispers about Suzanne maybe coming back. I'd won something, sure. Colleagues like Marcel gave me nods of respect, and even Anna started asking for my input on specials. But the system hadn't crumbled. Carlos was still scrubbing dishes, and I caught Richard glancing at me like he was waiting for a mistake. Late one night, wiping down my station, the grease smudged on my knuckles, I started thinking hard. Was it worth staying? I could keep grinding here, proving myself every damn day, hoping the kitchen would change. Or I could walk away, start fresh somewhere else, maybe even open my own place someday. The idea felt like a spark, exciting but terrifying. I'd clawed my way up from peeling potatoes to cooking real dishes, but it wasn't enough. The restaurant still felt like a battlefield, and I was tired of dodging bullets. My diploma, tucked in my locker, reminded me I had the skills to go anywhere, but leaving meant risking everything I'd built, everything my mom had sacrificed for. I sat in my car after that shift, the streetlights casting long shadows, my notebook open on my lap. I'd written down every fight, every win, but I didn't have an answer. Staying meant more battles, more proving I wasn't what they thought. Leaving meant starting over, maybe facing the same crap somewhere else. Either way, I knew one thing, my fight wasn't over. I'd tasted what it felt like to be seen, to stand up and be heard. That was worth something, even if the war wasn't won. I closed the notebook, my hands steady for once, and decided I wasn't done yet. Not here, not anywhere. Months after the chaos at La Belle Epoque, I was still in that kitchen, the air heavy with the smell of sizzling butter and fresh herbs. I'd earned my spot on the line, plating dishes that made customers hum with approval. But I couldn't shake the feeling that guys like Carlos and Marcel were still stuck, their talents buried under dirty dishes and prep work. I wasn't some hero, but I'd been where they were, feeling invisible, like my worth didn't matter. I couldn't just move on and leave them behind. I started small. After shifts, I'd pull Carlos aside in the alley, the cool night air cutting through the kitchen's heat, and teach him knife techniques I'd learned in school. He'd practice, his hands clumsy at first, but getting sharper each time. I did the same with Marcel, showing him how to balance flavors for sauces. They soaked it up, their eyes lighting up like mine used to. I talked to Anna too, convincing her to join us. We'd meet at a community center on weekends, using their kitchen to practice recipes. I called it Second Chance Skills, a way for folks like us, overlooked, pushed down, to learn and grow. It wasn't fancy, just a folding table, some borrowed pans, and a group of us sharing what we knew. It spread. Other workers, dishwashers, busboys, even a line cook from another restaurant started showing up. We'd cook, laugh, and talk about the crap we faced at work. It wasn't about fixing the world. It was about giving us a shot to be seen. I'd watch Carlos nail a perfect julienne or Marcel plate a dish like a pro, and I'd feel something bigger than pride. It was like we were building our own kitchen, one where nobody got to throw plates or tell us we didn't belong. I still worked at La Belle Epoque, still felt the old system's weight, but every time I walked into that community center, I remembered why I kept going. Respect wasn't something you won once and kept. It was a dish you had to cook every single day, with every choice, every fight, and I was ready to keep cooking it for me and for them. Looking back, standing in the kitchen at La Belle Epoque, the heat of the grill on my face and the smell of fresh thyme in the air, I can still feel that night when the plate shattered. It changed me. I'm not just the guy who survived Suzanne's attacks. I'm someone who learned to fight for my place. I couldn't have done it alone. Carlos, with his quiet courage, Anna, who found her voice, and even Marcel, who showed me I wasn't the only one hurt, they carried me through. My mom, too, who never stopped believing I could be a chef, her pride like a fire keeping me warm. And you, listening to my story, you're part of this now. Thank you for hearing me out, for caring about what it means to stand up when the world tries to keep you down. It's not just my fight, it's ours. I've been thinking a lot about what respect means. It's not a one-time win. It's a dish I cook every day, sometimes burning my hands in the process. I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like you didn't belong? Like someone tried to make you small because of who you are? Maybe it was a boss, a coworker, or a system that didn't see you. What did you do? Did you fight back, or did you hold it in, waiting for the right moment? I'm still figuring out how to keep going in a place like this kitchen, where the rules don't always bend. How do you keep pushing when the odds feel stacked against you? Drop your stories in the comments. I'm reading everyone. Let's keep this conversation alive, because respect isn't just something we earn. It's something we build together.